first, let's talk a little bit about what is a team. Let's define that, because sometimes we're not entirely clear. At least I've found that with groups I work with. Let's talk about a group versus team. So characteristics of a group. People are really individually focused, right? They have the individual goals and motivations that they're trying to get out of this particular project or teamwork. They operate by external rules of order. They may have a fixed facilitator. They see themselves really as individual positions of authority. They may not meet regularly, okay? So a group, seem pretty clear what a group is? When we, thank you for the feedback. When we talk about team is also something that's a little bit different. We talk about collective we focus, right? There's common goals, there's interdependence, there may be shared leadership in the team. In fact, one of the best practices nowadays in terms of teamwork is that there is actually shared leadership, that the official leader of the team will pass the baton to the members of that team so that they're able to take shared leadership role occasionally. So you want to empower individuals in the team. You meet regularly. You're problem solving, process improvement. Okay? You're debating for sound decisions because you want to make decisions as a team. Now, some of you may say, Melissa, that's kind of obvious, right? The differences between a group and a team. But if you think about the way that you approach your team, it may be that sometimes we approach it as a group when actually we should be treating it more as a team, right? We're looking at the individuals and what the individuals need in that team instead of looking at what the team needs collectively. And conversely is also true. We might have a team which is actually a group of people, and we don't need to be treating it as a team. So here we are with a group of people who have individual goals and needs and don't necessarily see themselves as a team, and we're trying to do team building events with them. That's also not going to go well. So I think it's important for us to get really clear about, do I actually have a group that I'm working with or managing, or do I have a team? And today we're going to talk about how to work with a team and make a team high performing, if that's, I'm assuming that's what most of you are working in or are managing. So I'm going to take you through, as promised, the stages of teams, and we'll talk first about what's happening in those stages, and then certainly what do we need to do to push a team through to the next stage. I have kind of bad news here. You can't skip any of these stages. All teams, the research shows, go through all of these stages in order to get to the high-performing stage. And by the way, this also can apply to your personal life. So couples, family members, right, friendships will go through also similar stages. So just to talk about it on the personal side for a moment before I get into the professional side. You know, when you come together, you're dating, right? And everything's really nice, and you're very polite with each other, and you know, you think that person's laugh is really cute and kind of funny. And then you're together for a little while, and you go through the storming phase, and you're like, wow, that laugh was kind of cute, but now it's getting a little annoying, right? Okay, so this can happen with couples, it can happen with groups, friends, etc. But we'll talk about the professional side, and I'll let you apply it to your personal sides on your own. So what's happening in the forming stage of teams? So people are feeling kind of tentative, unsure. They're being polite to each other, right? They're getting to know each other. There's introductions. You may have some team events where everybody kind of does these icebreakers, right? I mean, you're really the experts in all that kind of stuff, running team meetings and so forth. So people are agreeable, right? A lot of clarity is needed right up front of who's going to be responsible for what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. You know, sometimes today we're moving so quickly that we maybe gloss over the forming stage, or we don't spend enough time in the forming stage. The forming stage is really, really important. It's about employee orientation, right, and training, and those kinds of things. If we just throw people into the cold water, it can sometimes work well, but it's really great if we can take some time out here to really emphasize how they could engage in the team and get to know the team and become good at operating within the team. So what starts to happen in storming is people are feeling more confident, which is a good thing, right? People are starting to debate They're sharing their opinions more. There's more trust being built. So there's some good things about storming too. In fact, you may have had this experience where when people come from other organizations, so one of my clients is LinkedIn actually, and they recruit a lot out of different high-tech companies. So there's Netflix and there's Yahoo and all kinds of great companies, and people who come from those companies will come into LinkedIn. And what happens in a team is they'll bring in best practices, which is a good thing from those other high-tech companies, but sometimes it starts to be, well, you know, at Netflix we did it better. You know, at Yahoo things really worked well, right? You know, when you've had that kind of situation. So it's good, and it's also can get a little bit tricky. So because sometimes it gets challenging, or people start colluding, or there might even be some arguments or some fighting. We'll talk about how to solve that, because that's really the one that everyone goes, oh gosh, how do I deal with storming? Well, I'll give you one little hint about storming. Don't ignore it. Don't avoid it. Don't assume that it's just going to clean itself up on its own. It most likely won't. So we'll talk about how to make sure that we get through that effectively. Then there's norming. And norming is once you've come through the storm, there should be some sense of calm. You know, sometimes people just get sick of fighting, right? And they go, okay, fine. We'll just give in and make things smoother. People are sharing responsibility now. They're starting to see themselves as a team, right? There's healthy debate. There's interdependence. You're re-clarifying the roles and processes and so forth that you did in forming, right? There may need to be some adjustments and some tweaks based on the storm. So in norming, things are starting to really normalize and get calm. And then you're able to really start to perform, and hopefully it's high performance. So there's a lot of clarity. People have said, you know, Melissa, it's easy. We have a team event or a team dinner or a happy hour, and everybody just knows what to talk about. There's no awkward silences, right? We're striving for excellence. We're really productive. We're sharing responsibilities with each other. We're celebrating successes, right? There's a lot of really good communication. Yeah, it's perfectly normal for a high-performing team to disagree and have conflict. In fact, having conflict and disagreeing is considered normal and healthy and positive, right? Because then they're able to get ideas out there. That's where innovation comes from. If we're all just thinking in the same way, you have groupthink, and that can be certainly efficient, but it isn't necessarily going to breed innovation or new ideas. Some of the things you want to consider doing in the forming stage is some team building. Taking time out for people to get to know each other. What makes people tick? If you understand what motivates people, you're more likely to have their buy-in to what the commitment is around the team, right? So if any of you have read anything by Daniel Pink, he does a whole series on motivation and what are different motivators. And what's equally important to the extrinsic motivators, right? So like money or promotions or external recognition, are the intrinsic motivators that people have. So what do they care about? What is meaningful to them? In fact, the research shows, the Gallup poll just showed that the number one reasons why people stay in a job is because they feel as though they're contributing to something meaningful, right? So if you think about where do people really feel as though they're committed in terms of the teamwork and to the project and to the overall vision, that's where you'll get the most out of the folks, and the most energy will be within the team. So you're going to discuss goals and roles, you're going to set guidelines, make sure that people understand what are the rules that we're going to operate by, how are we going to communicate with each other, right? Do we use chat? Do we use phone? Do we use video? What is the right way? And then certainly, like I said earlier, make sure that people have the right orientation and training on the different processes and products and so forth. Key here is anticipating that there's going to be conflict. So you know you have a team coming together, you know that as a couple you've just gotten married and you've had your honeymoon, and that the honeymoon may end at some point, right? And you'll want to say, we're going to have some storms, we're going to have some conflict, we're going to disagree on some things. And the idea is hopefully informing, you've set some guidelines around that fighting, right? Like, we're not going to fight at the dinner table, right? We're going to take our fights into the living room. Or we're not going to fight, you know, behind people's backs. We're going to just surface that conflict when we're having a team meeting and discuss it, right? Hey, look, we disagree on this. We don't think this is the right way we're going to go forward. And as a leader, really important that you mine for it. There's one leader that I work with, and he says, you know what? when I get people together in the team for the first 5 minutes, I just say, okay, tell me what's not working, tell me what you're unhappy about. And just let people just sort of vent stuff. And he says that's really helpful because it just allows people to sort of get it all out of their system and then also be able to deal with some of the issues that might be causing problems in the team, right? So he can remove some of those obstacles so they're able to continue to be efficient and perform well. So to be able to mediate, right? Bringing people into your office and sitting them down and saying, hey, let's talk about this. You know, obviously there's some tension or some collusion going on here. We need to sort that out because it's not healthy for the team. And then, of course, a lot of listening. There's a wonderful book. It's called Multipliers. The Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. Wonderful book. And she essentially finds, well, I'm basically going to give you the punchline of the book, so now you don't have to buy it anymore. But no, it's a very, very good book. But she interviews leaders all over the world. And the essence of it is that good leaders listen more. And what I say often about leaders is that if you could act like an anthropologist, right? What do anthropologists do? They observe, they ask questions, they listen a lot, that you can be more effective as a leader because you'll truly understand what your people need. So what do we do in norming then? Team retreat is somehow nice, right? To kind of celebrate that we've come through the storm is a good idea. Restate and reclarify, as I said earlier, about those rules, regulations, guidelines, processes, how are we going to communicate, etc. How are we going to solve conflict, because we've obviously just had some. So emphasize all of that. Really emphasize the interdependence, you know, how people are working well together. People are, as I said before, are starting to feel as though they are we as a team. So you want to encourage the debate. Right? Encourage debate and solutions. And then once you're at performing, key is celebrating success. Right? So sometimes teams, you know, or leaders of teams that are really high performing kind of go, yeah, all I need to do is let them run. They've got this, right? So I can kind of go on to other things now and assume that that team's going to really be on autopilot now because they're really running well. Well, that's when things get a little tricky. So don't leave high-performing teams alone. Make sure you can come in and you say, hey, you know, what can I do to challenge you? What can I do to celebrate some of these successes? Maybe I could do some communication widespread across the organization, advocate for both individuals and the team efforts, right? So you still have an active role as a leader, even in a high-performing team, especially in a high-performing team if you want to sustain it. Because the risk is people get bored and they move on, right? And you may need to keep them a little bit longer. So the more you can make it attractive for them and appeal to the individual motivations, the better it is there too. Right? And then, of course, sharing leadership responsibilities. So sometimes companies, what I'm seeing now, is they're creating team leadership positions, right? Or they're delegating some leadership. So it's not really an official promotion to a leader role or a manager role, but they have some leadership or management responsibility, and that just adds another layer of challenge to them. So that's exciting. All right. So you see some of the methods here. I hope you've already taken away some tips from forming, storming, norming, and performing. So characteristics of a great team leader, because that's really the key of being able to make sure that that team gets to high performing. And it's interesting because the research also shows that people leave a job because of not having a good relationship with their leader or their manager. That's the number one reason why people leave a job. I said earlier that they stay in a job when they're contributing to something meaningful. So, I don't mean to add more pressure onto you, but just to be considering, my job as a role, my job as a leader or as a manager, how much time do I really need to invest in the people in my team? There's also a statistic about that because some people, I'm guessing that many of you also have stuff that you have to get done. You have to work on tasks. You have to jump in and roll up your sleeves and get work done too, alongside your team. And of course, delegate and take care of your team. The statistic is that at least 50% of your time as a manager, at least 50% should be devoted to removing obstacles, solving problems, listening, and taking care of your team. So the people manager side of your job needs to be at least 50%. So if you're only doing 20 or 30% on people management and you're just banging away on your laptop and making phone calls and dealing with all the tasks that need to get done at your events, like 80% of the time, then your people might be going, wow, I really wish that our manager or leader is there for me a bit more, right? So if you can spend a little more time on that, you'll just get a better effect, or certainly more productivity out of your team. And that'll help you not have so many issues or conflicts, particularly in the back end or as you get tight down to the deadlines. So linking the overall vision of whatever the event is, for example, or whatever the project is or the company goals are, link that to the individual and team goals so that people know, how do I fit into the team and how does the team fit into this overall objective, right? So being present and taking time to listen surfaces and mediates conflict, advocates for individuals and team, right? And what I mean by advocates is also, promoting, like doing some public PR for your team, if you will. So public recognition too, and saying, hey, this person did this, they did a great job. Maybe even doing some of that with some of your clients, right? That can also be very empowering and inspiring for the people in your team. And then celebrating and communicating those successes. That's essentially what I'm saying there. Okay. Anything you'd add or question on that? We have another one in the front here.
If you're giving more than 50% of your time to your team, do you have any suggestions on how to curb that back?
How to curb back?
If you're giving maybe 80% of your time,
how
to curb back
to the people management?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it isn't science. So if 80% works and feels right for you, then that's okay. It's okay if it's 80%. If it's because you're getting sucked into drama, or you've got some, low performers, or you've got some other stuff going on and you really want to kind of get away from that because it's dragging you away from being productive, then yeah, that needs to change. So I can throw something at you that might be helpful. Behavior, when you give someone feedback about their behavior, it should change immediately. So what that means is, if you've got somebody who's, I'm just making this up, this situation, you didn't say this. Okay. I'm just making this up. She didn't tell me she had any problems with anybody, FYI. But in situations like that, it can be typically that there's some drama going on, right? And that you get carried away in it. If it's behavior, then once you tell someone, hey, this behavior has to change because of the impact on the team, because of the impact on your own image, because of the impact on yourself as the manager, then if that person understands what they need to change, or what it is that needs to change, and then what specifically to do to change it, then it should change immediately, which means 1 week, 2 weeks, a month maximum, right? It does not mean, let's look at this for 6 months and I have to keep telling them every week or every month that it has to change. That is not going to change. I hate to tell you, it's not. So that's just an energy drain for you. If it's a learning curve, like a skill, because you've got some new folks, they've never done something before, and it's learning, if that takes even 2 or 3 months, that's okay, because they're learning, as long as you're seeing progression. So that's okay that it takes time. If it takes too much time, of course, that might be a performance issue. But a reasonable amount of time is a couple of months there, at least before you can see improvement. So anything that has to do with behavior, whether someone's late, someone's grumpy, someone's not dealing with customers or vendors well, someone's not dealing with the team well, all of that, that should change immediately. And if it doesn't, you should not devote any more energy to that. All right, so key learning points. So these are your key takeaways I hope you did. Assessing the stage of your team, so being able to do that. Now you can do that, hopefully, well. And then take some action on it, right? And then, as I said, don't skip or skimp on the forming. That's going to help you get through those stages quickly. It does feel a little bit time-consuming because you're going, okay, are we formed yet? Everybody like each other? Good. Can we just get the work done? Right? Align individual, team, and organizational goals. Surface conflict and deal with it. I've mentioned that several times. And then, of course, celebrating and communicating successes. Also your own. It's good for your own image to do that, too.